The existentialist French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "We're like the eye that sees all, but can never really see itself, only reflections of itself." This is a powerful statement. How is it that our minds have this ability to see outwards, yet are inherently blind when it comes to seeing ourselves? Let me illustrate with one of my own reflections, not one that I'm proud of. I recently got caught on camera, speeding yet again, which means that now I'm on this good behavior period for the next 12 months and have to stay within the speed limits. My friends have placed bets on me not making it through the full year. It really seems the odds are stacked against me. While this is not an excuse, I just keep forgetting I'm not on the autobahn in my home country of Germany, which is our motorway where in many parts there are no speed limits. Once I passed the driving test, what can I say? The autobahn fueled my love of speed. So although I know it gets me into trouble, every now and then the limbic system in my brain gets the better of me and I hit the accelerator just for a few seconds to brake and seamlessly merge back into traffic. Can I really blame my need for speed on the autobahn though? If I'm honest, growing up, my mother always complained that I spoke too fast, moved too fast, had too little patience. I used to run everywhere rather than walk, as if I was in my very own race against time. Let's make the invisible visible. Now we're inside the brain. In my own brain, high levels of dopamine combined with a high cortical thickness in the left orbitofrontal cortex lead to an adventure thrill disposition, a heightened tolerance to take risks, a sense of optimism some would say is uncalled for, and a heightened sense of urgency, also labeled time press by psychologists, which, amongst other things, can lead to, let's say, a spirited driving style. It's always good to know that there's method to one's madness. I also tried to explain this to the policeman who pulled me over, but I lost him at the orbitofrontal cortex. I specialize in a field called personality neuroscience, which is a way of saying that I get to marvel at the madness of myself and other human beings as a profession, and that I try to decode our individual natures and our behavior by looking at the connection between genes, neurotransmitters, hormones, emotions, and narratives to make sense of who we are at an individual level and why we behave the way we do. And I really do think that we are blind when it comes to seeing ourselves. It's as if we're all good at coming up with stories to make sense of our lives and our behaviors in hindsight, while being in the dark about the true reasons for our own behaviors. You might say, I've never noticed this. That's not a problem for me. And that's exactly the point. I'm going to try and show you how our brains have this inbuilt blindness that makes it very hard for ourselves to notice what we're missing, seeing but not seeing. So let's do a little experiment so you can experience this firsthand. I'd like to invite you, everyone, to have a quick look around in the room and very quickly count all the things that you can see that are red. Stop. Thank you. Who saw up to 5 things that are red? Who saw more than 5 things? More than 10 things? Smart audience. Who saw more than 5 things that are blue? Almost no one. And this tells us interesting things about how our minds work. Firstly, we don't see the world as it is. We see it depending on where we direct our attention. While we're scanning the environment for salient cues, we systematically miss all other cues. In fact, about 95% of what's going on around us remains below the radar of our conscious awareness. Meanwhile, we take about 35,000 decisions every single day. But while we sit here, talk to someone, or shop, our senses take in 11 million bits of information every single second. Only 40 out of those 11 million bits then get processed by our cognitive system. From an evolution perspective, this is the newest part of the human brain, the neocortex, and it corresponds to analysis, strategic planning, reasoning, and language. The vast majority of bits, though, gets processed through the emotional relevance detectors of our limbic system sitting below the neocortex. The limbic system is the summary of brain structures that are responsible for emotion processing. It's not only where our emotion resides, though. It's also where we have motivation, intuition, and memory. It is also where all sensory inputs get integrated and evaluated, whether they make it through, up into our conscious awareness. This limbic system is very fast. It controls our human behavior, and it's in fact 200 times faster than the cognitive system, which means it always precedes it. And what that means is that we're all far less rational than we like to believe we are. The old philosopher Plato had this idealistic idea about the human mind, which has actually deeply shaped our views about ourselves up until this day. So he imagined that reason is in the driving seat. There's this rational charioteer, and he's controlling our emotions, signified by wild running horses. Now, some 2,500 years later, neuroscientists have to say, at best, we're under the illusion of rationality. In fact, there's this big, wild elephant, and it's taken the charioteer for a ride. This elephant is our limbic system, and it steers us into all sorts of directions we are not consciously aware of. Let's have a closer look at this elephant. We all operate and navigate our environment based on three major emotional driving forces. In personality neurosciences, we know them as the big three. The first driving force in our brain is the stimulants-driven system, fueled by dopamine. It seeks what's new, what's fun, what's exciting. Colloquially speaking, the stimulant system and dopamine have been described as the sex, drugs, and rock and roll neurotransmitter. And it is certainly our pleasure-seeking drive. The second system is the testosterone-fueled dominance system. Evolutionarily speaking, we're social animals and we can't live without community. So the higher our social rank, the better our access to partners and material resources. This drive is firmly installed in our brain as the power, status, and significance-seeking dominance drive. Now, the third driving force is the oxytocin and estrogen-driven balance system. It's our desire to bond, to form attachments, to fit in with a group, to survive, and to care for others. Now, in between those three driving forces, we find the range of human motivations and dispositions, and we can understand which emotional dimension they originate from. Now, every one of us has a different emphasis, depending on which driving force is most active in their brain. And this is how we come to understand different personalities. Now, we've been talking about my driving situation. I'd now like to speak about what other irrational people, not you of course, may be doing. So when people receive an offer, their decision to accept or reject it depends on whether it's perceived as a fair deal. We know that buying pain, which is the discomfort when paying for a purchase, increases as the price gets too high. But then we all have this one friend or family member who seems to just be in extreme pain when spending any money. In fact, they spend 5 months, 10 Excel spreadsheets to research and compare all options. And when they finally make a decision, what happens? Buyer's remorse. If we look at their brain in the fMRI scan, we can actually see that the insula, the pain center in the brain, lights up. They really do feel the pain. This affects 1 in 4 people in the population. They are a marketer's nightmare and perhaps a piggy bank manufacturer's dream. And then we all know these people who seem to be in ecstasy when they spend money. This affects 15% of the population, but my guess is probably a few more in this room, because they are the stimulants-driven, curious types. The more they spend, the happier they get, and the more they enjoy it. For example, a good bottle of wine. And it doesn't even matter anymore what the real value of the product is. If we give them a $5 bottle of wine and we say this is a $50 bottle of wine, they will enjoy it indefinitely more, although it's the same cheap stuff. This, to some extent, is true for all people, but specifically true for these people. The effect is much stronger. So there are 2 effects that are very dominant in these people. The one is price blindness, and the other one is high price bias. So not only do they not care about the price of something if they want it, but also the higher the price, the more attractive it appears to them. So in short, the more it costs, the more they enjoy it, and the more happy they get. Literally, when we look at their brain in the brain scanner, we see that the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center in their brain, gets activated when they spend money they didn't even have in the first place. So if you have a friend like this and trying to reason with them about an impulse purchase, just drop it and either cheer them on or confiscate their credit card if it really needs an intervention. Clever brands know how to use this very well. But how come they know who you are? If you're one of these tradition-minded types, we know that images of black and white from a time before smartphones, values of trust, quality, and durability really appeal to your sense of nostalgia and wanting to go back in time. And because I'd rather have you buy a Kelvinator fridge than vote for Donald Trump, we tested this personalized Facebook ad. And when we look at the results of the personalized ad compared to the generic control ad, we can see that the engagement rate goes up more than 280% on desktop and 7% on mobile. And the click-through rate goes through the roof with more than 800% increase in the personalized version on desktop versus 3% on mobile. What about the physical world? Surely it's safe to go window shopping on a Saturday, right? Well, if you happen to find yourself drawn into a Hugo Boss store, you're very likely to be a dominance-driven, status-conscious customer. And the brand knows this very well. Besides the way everything is designed and the way they communicate, they also hang their clothes very high on the racks, because that is a subconscious signal of scarcity, which is a subconscious signal of status. So by having to making reach you up to get to the clothes, they make you want to buy them. So when we look at how this appeals across different personalities, we can see that exactly the dominance-driven performer type is highly attracted to this environment, 94% stronger than the normal person. What about enjoying your favorite chocolate from the comfort of your home? Well, if you prefer Tim Tam over Cadbury and Ferrero, you better think twice before you reach for another piece of chocolate while watching their ads full of love hearts and people hugging trees to appeal to the oxytocin drive in your balance system. When we look at the results, we can see that harmonizers are 194% more likely to respond favorably to this ad than the average person. Why does this all matter? Although there is nothing wrong with trying to turn back time in a comforting, everlasting kitchen, climbing up racks of high-end clothing, or indulging in chocolate, or perhaps striving for a sense of certainty in an uncertain world via the administration of elaborate Excel spreadsheets, or on the contrary, maxing out the credit card to keep up with the next big thing. We just have to be aware that often these behaviors don't satisfy our underlying emotional individual needs for excitement or adventure or status, control, or perhaps nostalgia or harmony. These behaviors are mere reflections of ourselves, in Jean-Paul Sartre's sense. They are subtle cues that hint to deeply held underlying truths about ourselves that normally remain below the radar of our conscious awareness because they reside in the part of the brain that we have no conscious access to without neuroscience. What that also means is that the few people who understand these truths about ourselves better than we understand ourselves, and I'm talking about tech giants, consumer brands, and certain politicians, have the power to direct our decision-making if we let them. If we are not connected to and tuned in to our own emotions, those who are will decide for us what we choose. Our brains are amazing, and I hope that you're suitably intrigued to explore your own minds even further, so that not only players with vested interests can harvest this understanding, you can. We need not be stuck with internal blinkers, forever slaves to our internal blindness. In fact, we now have the opportunity, perhaps the responsibility, to not only look outwards on the world, but to rationally understand our internal selves. Please wish me good luck with the driving. Thank you.